right, well, good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming. We're calling this press conference here as both some members of Congress as well as some, I think, very important outside voices to stand here and say that the United States should be standing with our Kurdish allies, particularly at this hour of threat that they're facing from Iranian-backed forces over in Iraq. We have other veterans. I served in Iraq. I know Duncan did, and I know some of these other guys have. And I can just tell you, I think for anyone who served over there, that's a seminal experience in your life. But if there was one thing I took away from that experience, just in terms of understanding the region, it was how nefarious an influence that Iran had in Iraq during the time that we had a lot of troops there. I was in a Sunni Arab area in Al Anbar province, but the main people causing trouble in other parts of Iraq and the main source of casualties for American troops were people like Qasem Soleimani, the Quds force, and Shia militia. And so what you have now is a faithful ally, the Kurds, who've been with America for a long time and has fought alongside America, being attacked or being staged for attacks at a minimum, Iranian-backed forces who have American blood on their hands. And the kicker is they're launching attacks against the Kurds or preparing to do so with American weapons. We cannot let this happen. So the Congress needs to speak out, and we urge the Trump administration to be very clear that we're not going to abandon our Kurdish allies in this hour of need. And so with that, I'd like to bring up Michael Pregent, who's the Executive Director of the Veterans Against the Deal, and he's an adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. So after the president gave a very tough speech on the Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran, basically designating the entirety of the Revolutionary Guard Corps for supporting Qasem Soleimani's Quds force, 60 hours later, Qasem Soleimani used IRGC Quds force Shia militias to start pushing against an ally. And we've seen that. And we've seen Prime Minister Abadi try to control these provocations by the Shia militias and his security forces. He has been successful when telling his security forces not to do something, but not successful when he's told the Hashid al-Shabi or the Shia militias not to do something. That's because they don't answer to him, and Hadi al-Amiri says that better than anybody else. He says the Hashid al-Shabi do not answer to Prime Minister Abadi, they answer to me, and I answer to Qasem Soleimani. Now, the biggest problem I have as a veteran of this war, and as a former intel advisor to General Petraeus on Iranian influence in Iraq, is that these militias are actually under the Ministry of Interior. They fall under the command and control of the Ministry of Interior, and we have a designated terrorist, Abu Mehdi al-Muhandis, who's a commander of the Hashid al-Shabi. He decides who gets paid. His forces make up about 20% of the Hashid al-Shabi, yet they receive about 90% of the funds. They have access to U.S. equipment in the MOI, and they're using U.S. tanks. And any American soldier who's ever driven a tank before knows that you can't just pick one up on the battlefield and learn to drive it. You got to be trained by an American advisor on how to do it. And the only way that you get that training is if you're wearing an Iraqi uniform. And these militias brag that they can wear any uniform within the Iraqi security forces, and they're doing so. So we have a violation of the Leahy Law by providing arms and funds to the Ministry of Interior where these militias operate. And you also have a violation of our train and equip program, the U.S. train and equip program. These things need to be reported. If I had this much intelligence in 2007 to show General Petraeus, we would have got rid of all these guys. Now all you have to do is look on a TV to see it. But anyway, thank you for your time, and I hope we can get to the bottom of this.
Thanks. Well, thank you. So we've got another Duncan Hunter's joining us now too. I want to introduce Robert Bartlett, who I think can offer some powerful testimony about these Iranian groups and what they're capable of, having faced it firsthand.
Hello, I'm retired medically Staff Sergeant Robert Bartlett. I was in the Iraq War. I'm a direct result of Iranian influence during the Iraq War, and that still continues to this day. 4.5 years of surgeries, died 3 times, watched my buddies get killed. That's reality. Now, our job as Americans is always to honor our commitments in policy, and who we support and who we don't support. Because obviously we don't support Iran currently, not this regime anyways. Why? Because they're actively killing Americans, and they say death to America, death to Israel on a constant basis. So we always need to make sure whatever we are supporting is going directly for something that supports our ideals and our Constitution and our flag and our people. That's important. Now, if it's going to Iran and killing more Americans or more people that were, some of the people that we're working with, like the Kurdish, maybe we need to really look at that and find out what is going on. Why is the money going to a regime that killed Americans? We must always strive to stop that. I appreciate your time.
I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues who's been on these issues for a long time from Arizona, Trent Franks.
Well, first, it's an honor to stand here with Ron DeSantis and one Duncan Hunter, truly both heroes of this republic, and I appreciate the comments I've heard here already. I think that it's hard for me to add a great deal of gravity to Mr. Mike Pregen's comments. The man has been there. He understands the situation. All of you have seen the pictures of Hezbollah flags on M1 tanks, and it's important that we begin as a nation now to reassess what's taking place in Iraq. This president has had a tremendously effective instinct in making sure that we did not recertify the Iranian nuclear deal. And I'm proud of him for that. And I hope now that he listens to his own instincts and rather than the DC establishment when it comes to recognizing the insinuation of Iranian influence in Iraq. Iran has been committed since their revolution to essentially subjugate the entire world. They can't do that without nuclear weapons, and they are continuing to pursue that with everything that they can. In the meantime, they're one of the most malicious and dangerous influences in the entire Middle East, and we must not let them gain the stronger and stronger foothold than they already have in Iraq. And so I would just call upon the President, call upon America to take a good look here and see what we're doing that in any way strengthens Iran's influence in the Middle East. Because that is not only death to America, it's death. They want death to America. They want death to anyone that is not within their purview. And I would just suggest to you that unless we have a regime change in Iran, and unless we make sure that we build down and dismantle their nuclear capability and take them off trajectory from becoming a nuclear armed nation, that whatever costs there may be to that will pale in comparison to dealing with an Iran with nuclear weapons. And we need to understand them from the malicious influence that they are, and I wish the President well in that regard.
Thanks. I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues from New York who I serve with on the Foreign Affairs Committee, who really understands these issues well, Lee Zeldin.
I want to thank Congressman DeSantis for his leadership in bringing us all together for this important cause at this moment in time, especially while Iran continues its destabilizing activities, both through official and unofficial associates. Now we are reminded once again of the need to stand strong with those who have been our brave, vital allies in this fight. And the Kurds especially have shown a tremendous amount of bravery and courage in bringing the fight to ISIS. They have been leaders in this cause, which doesn't just protect their homes, their families, their community, but with a lot of our service members in harm's way, it also protects vital American national interests. Most importantly, it protects Americans' lives. So when the Kurds end up with a vote of independence, and you have an Iranian-backed influence seeking to cause great harm, where Kurds are forced to flee their homes and live in other safe spaces that might be in their region but not inside their home. I wonder where is the rest of the free world? Where's their leadership? Congressman DeSantis is someone who knows that we need to come together as a nation at this time of need. The Kurds have certainly been there at a time where the United States has desperately relied on them. And as a result of the bravery of many Kurds, ISIS is being driven out of Iraq. Now, there are Iraqi counterterrorism services and other entities that have done a tremendous job in helping drive ISIS out. But Iran has gained much more of a stronghold amongst the Iraqi government. It's important for al-Abadi to take more leadership over his own government, to reject this Iranian influence. The Iranians can't help themselves but to meddle all over the Middle East. But whether it's the IRGC's activities, Qasem Soleimani's specifically in leading that effort, it's the support of Assad in Syria or Hezbollah, what we're seeing right now in Iraq, we have to understand and appreciate is coming at a moment after countless sacrifice that's been made by American service members, lives lost, limbs lost, missed holidays, and at a tremendous financial cost as well. And we can't have that reversed by allowing Iran to gain control over their neighbors. So part of why we're here is to stand strong with the Kurds, to thank them for their bravery, for bringing the fight to ISIS and helping drive them out of Iraq. And also to send a strong message to al-Abadi that it's time for him to take control of his own government. I thank all of the veterans who are behind me. We get to live in the greatest country in the entire world. I believe that strongly. I know that there are other people here who care deeply about your country. There's nothing wrong with having great pride in where you're from. I will say unapologetically, we all will say unapologetically, we love our country greatly. And for the sacrifice of our veterans who stand here with us for our freedoms and for our liberties, and especially for those who paid even greater sacrifice than the rest of us in other ways, I just say thank you for allowing me the privilege of living in the greatest country in the world.
Well, thanks, Lee. We have Congressman Duncan Hunter from California. One of our Marine vets has served in Iraq and has been a strong supporter of the Kurds.
Hey guys, coming up. Ron, thank you very much, and to everybody here, I want to just place those right here. I just want a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's the M1 Abrams tank with the Hezbollah flag. I don't care what the State Department says, they can't argue with this. At the best, the State Department has been derelict in their duties, and at the worst, they've been complicit with allowing the Iranians to take back what I and a lot of my brothers in arms fought for. America stands by her allies, and we kill our enemies. That's what we do as a nation. And to see the Iranians run roughshod, here's pictures of Soleimani with the Iraqi militias, with the Iraqi militia leaders. So here's the IRGC commander with the militias that we're equipping, training, and sending into combat. So imagine the Kurds looking south and seeing Iranian and Iraqi forces moving north with American gear coming up on them, and them having to move back. Because we do a lot of great things in this country. One of them is make weapons, and we're equipping and training the wrong people. And it's time that this rose above what the State Department has screwed up over and over. Iraq was a military victory lost by politics and the State Department. Yeah. Afghanistan, a military victory lost by the State Department and politics. The State Department's going to lose us Iraq again in one of the worst ways, not just to the civil war in the country itself, but now to the Iranians. And you're going to be able to drive an M1 tank from Iran to the Israeli border south of Damascus if we don't do something and stop this. And it's time that we as Americans chose a side, and the side that we pick is freedom and our allies and the Kurds, and we're going to stand with you. And here's what's the most important thing, that one of the reasons that I'm here, this has to get above the State Department. I don't think President Trump knows what's going on here. I don't think he's seen this picture of his tank as Commander-in-Chief with the Hezbollah flag on it. I don't think General Mattis or Secretary Mattis has seen this picture of his M1 Abrams tank with the Hezbollah flag on it. I guarantee you the State Department knows what's going on. And it's time for them to get their heads out of the sand, or for this to be taken out of their hands completely, because they've screwed up over and over and over, and it's time that we fix this. So thank you very much for doing this and let me be a part of it. I'm not going to stand by while my brothers in arms that died and fought in Iraq for freedom. I fought in Iraq for freedom, and it's getting torn away right now while we're standing here. We're going to put a stop to it. Thank you.
Well done. All right.
Thank you.
That's great. I have this is great. Dilaman Abdul Qadir. He's the Kurdish fellow at the Endowment for Middle East Truth, and I think can offer an interesting perspective.
Thank you, Congressman DeSantis. I was actually in Kirkuk about 3 months ago, and then it was under the control of the Kurdish Peshmerga forces and the Kurdistan regional government. Kirkuk was safe and secure. The boarding crossings were under the control of the Kurds. There were no threats to Sunni minorities or the Turkmen minorities, even though the Kurds are a majority there. I was able to roam around free in Slemania, in Erbil, under the control and guidance of the Kurdish Peshmerga forces and the Kurdistan regional government. When I look back in 2011, when the Assad regime turned around and fought against its own people, over 300,000 Syrian refugees went into the Kurdistan regional government and the Kurdistan region to seek refuge. In 2014, when ISIS rose in Mosul and regions across the Iraqi territories, when the Iraqi military fled and left U.S. weapons in the hands of ISIS, Iraqi refugees did not turn towards Iran. They did not turn towards Syria. They did not go into Baghdad, but they sought refuge in the Kurdistan region territory. So we owe a debt to the Kurds, we owe a debt to the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, who have sacrificed over 2,000 of their lives and 9,000 wounded. So I urge this administration and also the representatives here to back the Kurds. Iran does not know the notion of sovereignty. That's why they are in Yemen, that's why they are in Iraq and Syria and attempting to reach the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Well, and I think that with if the Kurds are pushed back, Iran continues to dominate Iraq, and they can dominate the Sunni Arabs in western Iraq, you're going to have a land bridge from Iran all the way into Syria, right on Israel's doorstep. That is going to be an absolute disaster for our security interests and our allies' security interests. And then the other thing I would say, and I think probably most of the people up here would agree, the Congress should come out and be clear that we support Kurdish independence. That's what we ultimately need. Should have been done a long time ago. The sensitivities involved, Iran's not going to like it. I don't care. Turkey's not going to like it. They're not exactly a strong ally anymore. So I think now is the time to do it. And I think it would benefit America's national security interests if we did do that. And with that, I think we'll all be willing to take some questions if you have any.
Thank you. Absolutely, you are right.
Congressman, today Iraqi government just announced that negotiations with KRG has failed, and they're given 48 hours to the KRG. After that, they're threatening that they're going to attack and take control of the areas. What do you think in this critical moment? What do you think the U.S. government should do that they're threatening to go further into KRG areas?
I think the U.S. government should say it's unacceptable, and we're going to stand with the Kurds.
I would just add a little bit to that, and that is that Abadi promised that he would not attack the Kurds. He made that promise weeks ago, and for him to break his word before the whole world does not speak well of his leadership.
One more question, Congressman. They're also launching a campaign against the Kurdish media. Rudaw Network and other TV channels have been ordered to shut down their broadcasting just because they covered the PMU's offensive into Kirkuk and other areas. What do you think of that? This is another attempt of shutting down the voices coming out of KRG.
Well, it's an affront to our values in terms of the United States believing in a free exchange of ideas, but that's exactly what you get from a totalitarian Sharia state, which is what Iran is. They do not want freedom of ideas. They do not want the media to be able to report on their nefarious deeds.
Do you agree with the point that the U.S. or the Iraqi government might be in violation of the Leahy law or regulations regarding the transfer of end-use equipment?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, when you see some of these pictures and you see some of these people in these positions, we're sending money and weapons to Iraq. And this has been probably the problem with us supporting the Kurds. We would send it to Iraq and it would never get to the Kurds. They say, well, you can't do directly to the Kurds. That violates, policy. Well, I think our aid needs to go directly to the Kurds so that it will get there and they can use it to defend themselves. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's ironic, just to add to that, I had the privilege of offering the amendment some years back to give direct aid to the Kurds, and it passed on the House side, only to see the Obama administration try to kill it on the other side. The Obama administration stood by with a golf club in their hand while ISIS was raping and destroying innocent people across Iraq, and wouldn't stand up. But the Kurds were the one group that did stand up. They stood up and they protected Yazidis, they protected the Christians, and they did it without the Obama administration's help. And now this administration needs to stand by them and do what we can to maintain our commitment to that kind of courage.
We'll take a question in 1 second, but we have one more speaker, former assistant to the president, Dr. Sebastian Gorka.
Thanks so much, Congressman Sebastian Gorka, the Make America Great Again Coalition. I think it's very plain why we're here today. One of our closest partners in the region have been the people of Kurdistan. They have been reliable. They've shown their willingness to push back on Iranian influence. One of the greatest negative legacies that we inherited in the White House when I came on board was the absolutely outrageously utopian and unrealistic policy that we had with regards to Iran. Iran is a bad actor across the whole region, from Yemen to Iraq to Syria. We have to work together with our local partners to make sure that Shia jihadism, because there are multiple types of jihadism. America suffered the worst on September the 11th from Sunni jihadism. Today, I have become convinced, based upon my time in the White House, that we will crush Sunni jihadists like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, with the help of our compatriots such as the Kurds. But the greater threat today, much more dangerous, is Shia jihadism, as represented by the IRGC, the Quds Force, and the mullahs in Iran. If this regime uses the unspeakably large amounts of money that was provided to them by the Obama administration, we could be on the brink of an apocalyptic scenario in the Middle East, especially when it comes to nuclear weapons. I wholeheartedly congratulate the president on his decision to decertify the Iran deal. As far as I am concerned, the JCPOA Iran deal should be killed in the interests of U.S. security, Kurdish security, and the security of the region writ large. Thank you.
More? Anyone got questions? Yep.
Now, the Trump administration essentially said that they were not taking sides in this particular conflict, but who in the administration exactly over in the State Department is essentially pushing this stance exactly?
His name's McGurk. Is that right?
Brett McGurk. Exactly.
Very easy. There's his name, loud and clear. He worked for the Obama administration. He was a big supporter of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and somehow he snuck into this government and is doing the exact opposite of what our commander-in-chief said he wants to do in the region. Our president slams Iran every day. He decertified the Plan of Action, yet the State Department guy in charge is the one that invented the Plan of Action that the president just decertified. He needs to go. Mattis needs to take a hard look at this, and the president needs to see this. It needs to be elevated out of this one person's hand in the State Department so they can see what a travesty this is, and it's caused by us. This was caused by the U.S. State Department, and it's time to take it out of their hands, or at least elevate it to where the president or the Secretary of Defense has a straight-up say in this.
In your opinion, what are differences between Shia militia and ISIS?
Well, I mean, from an average American's perspective, they're both terrorist groups, and they both believe in an apocalyptic vision in which people that don't submit to their ideology are enemies and should be killed. I would say the difference on the ground right now is that since this president's taken office, the Sunni jihadists, principally ISIS, have really been driven back. I think a lot of that is that we've uncuffed the military's hands. We've strengthened the rules of engagement so they can actually go after these guys, and they are on the run. Now, it's still going to be a problem throughout European society. We saw yesterday in New York where you can have folks in our societies commit acts of terrorism. And I think that we're probably more at risk from the Sunni jihadists throughout Europe and in the United States who've come here. But having said that, I think if you look at over the last 2 years, the amount that Iran has strengthened itself throughout the region, when you're wheeling in billions of dollars in cash to the Iranian government like the Obama administration did, where do you think that money's going? It's going to the Quds force, it's going to the IRGC, it's going to Hezbollah. So it all goes to fund nefarious activities. So I think if you look at who is the most fearsome terrorist group in the Middle East right now, very well may be Hezbollah, very well may be the Quds force. They are organized and they are deadly, and they're on the ascent. And I think one of the reasons we're here today is to sound the alarm that we do not want the Middle East, we do not want allies of ours like the Kurds steamrolled by this Shia terrorist machine.
Yep.
Anything else?
Can I make one quick thing?
Sure.
That Brett McGurk question, if you want to stump Brett McGurk, ask him one simple question. Why is Abu Mehdi al-Muhandis, a designated terrorist, in charge of the Hashid al-Shaabi, the Shia militias? Why is he in the Ministry of Interior, and why does he have access to U.S. funds and equipment? Just ask him that. He won't be able to answer it. He'll say it doesn't exist. He'll say it's not true, and all the evidence is there for everybody to see.
On the question of Brett McGurk, the day after I resigned from the White House, I made a promise to the president that I would not attack individual members of the administration. But I must say something very serious. United States policies in Iraq today are being decided in the theater by Obama appointees. When you talk to people in the region, Kurdish leaders, when you talk to people who are on our side amongst the Sunnis, they keep asking me, why are our interlocutors exactly the same people who they were a year ago and 2 years ago? This is a very serious problem. The State Department, at least in theater, has not changed its policies, and I have great expectations that sooner or later Rex Tillerson and his leadership will take a grip of the 75,000 people in the State Department and start making sure that they reflect the president's policies. Because you heard it, the president, his instincts are always right, whether it's on Iran, whether it's on terrorism, whether it's on extreme vetting and counterterrorism, but these attitudes are not reflected by the State Department, and that will have to change.
Where is...
We have one more comment.
I think if I go back to your question, if you ask the Kurd what is the difference between ISIS and the Shiite militias, there's absolutely no difference except one is Sunni, one is Shiite. Both have pushback minorities, Christian minorities, Yazidi, Kurdish minorities, different factions on the ground. Both have looted, both have attacked the media, both have decimated villages and small towns. So I think it's time for the United States to implement a solid Kurdish policy, separate and distant from the one we have in Iraq. Thank you.
I would submit that there might be one more difference between ISIS and the Shia militia, and that is ISIS is clearly on the run. This administration has put them on the run like no one else. As far as an army that is holding territory, ISIS days are numbered, and the whole world should thank Donald Trump for that. But in the meantime, Shia militia and their jihadist ideology is on the rise, and it's doing great damage to America and the region.
Let me just reinforce what Congressman Frank said. About 3 years ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed this building, and he gave an amazing speech, and I'd like us to think about the one sentence in his speech that is the best summary of what is going on in the region right now. He said, If you want to understand the firestorm that is the Middle East, that is Iraq, that is Syria, it is very simply a game of thrones for the crown of the caliphate.
Yeah.
There was the Sunni extremist version of the caliphate, that's ISIS, that's Al-Qaeda, and that's competing with the Shia-dominated concept of the caliphate coming outside of Iran. What Congressman Frank said is exactly right. The big difference today is that thanks to the Trump administration, it is now the Shia caliphate that is more dangerous. To quote a special operations officer from a few months ago when I was in the West Wing, he said, "We are stacking the bad guys like cordwood. Our men, our women have been unleashed, and we are taking the war to groups like ISIS. We must not allow that success to be exploited by the Iranian regime so that their version of the caliphate can grow."
Where is Secretary Tillerson in this? How can Brett McGurk do this on his own?
I think he's trying to the best he can to try to sort of manage and herd a lot of Obama holdovers.
How do you recognize and value the leadership of Mr. Barzani, especially in the alignment of fighting against ISIS?
Tragically, the only mistake Barzani has really made is unfortunately overestimating American commitment to the Kurds, and that's our fault, not his.
Anything else?
A question for Dr. Gorka. You said that, following the terrorist attack last night, that perhaps political correctness is starting to be a danger to us, is starting to get us killed. Uzbekistan was not on the list of 7 countries where we had temporary bans. It seems like we have a population here of 3 to 4 million Muslims. Are you saying that perhaps we should be doing something with that population? I mean, what is it that we could possibly do with that population?
Political correctness wasn't a problem last night. Political correctness was a problem for the last 8 years. I trained thousands of federal law enforcement agents and military officers and non-commissioned officers before I came into the White House. Under the Obama administration, we were not allowed to even use the word jihad to describe what these people were saying they were doing. That's political correctness gone insane. When you can't describe the enemy using the vocabulary they use to describe themselves, you're living in a fantasy land. That's as if you're saying in 1944, as we're getting ready to storm the beaches in Normandy, okay guys, are you ready to go? Is your gun ready? Just one more thing, make sure you never use the word Nazi because you might offend a German. That's a bad SNL skit. It's insanity. That stopped on January the 20th at 12:01, but the swamp has a lot of political correctness left. Thank you.
But sir, you said the word and the attack still happened. So
Well, thanks, guys. If you guys want to follow up with us, I think some of us will still be around here. So I appreciate you coming out.